The hustle doesn't have to hurt. If performance pressure is making it hard to breathe, Grow Therapy helps you navigate stress, set boundaries, and actually feel like yourself again. Whether it's your first time in therapy or your 50th, Grow makes it easier to find a therapist who fits you, not the other way around. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Grow accepts over 100 insurance plans, including Medicaid in some states. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/start now to get started. That's growtherapy.com/start now. growtherapy.com/start now. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
Hi friends, Grace from the Working Hard podcast here. When you're stretching every dollar, a little goes a long way, and Walmart Business is here to help. They make it easy to order what you need, from tech and cleaning supplies to everyday essentials, all at low prices and with helpful tools like spend tracking and tax-exempt purchasing for eligible organizations. Because when your operations are smooth, your impact can be bigger. Visit business.walmart.com to get started.
Welcome to the Lessons from the Great Coaches podcast.
I've learned that you don't do it alone.
You learn so many different things from so many different coaches.
That's an elite learning environment.
Failure is not a problem. How you deal with it is a problem.
How to be resilient.
How important it is to infuse joy in the process of learning.
To be a good coach, you've got to give more than you take.
What an interesting life it is to be a leader.
Hello and welcome to the Great Coaches podcast, where we believe that there is no algorithm for leadership, and so we interview great sports coaches from around the world to try and find ideas to help all of us be better leaders. Today's episode is on the topic of habits, and we are joined for the discussion by Allister McCaw, who has just written a terrific new book called Habits That Make a Champion. Allister is that rare person who excels across disciplines and industries. In addition to being an author who has sold over 300,000 books, his podcast ranks in the top 1% in the world, and for the last 25 years, he has also consulted and worked with Olympic Gold Medalists, Grand Slam champions, Fortune 500 companies, NCAA Colleges, and professional sports teams. And you'll hear him mention many of these organisations in our interview. Some of the highlights from our discussion were his thoughts on the importance of developing healthy and positive self-talk, the stories he shares about Michael Jordan, Michael Schumacher and Roger Federer to explain the importance of being coachable, and the idea that obsession is a common trait among top performers, and this mindset helps them develop great habits. And just a quick message from me to say that if you want to improve your own leadership skills, you can reach me and another member of the team, Grant, at elevatedleadership.com.au, where our goal is to coach you towards the leader you aspire to be. And now, please enjoy our interview with Allister McCaw.
You're listening to the Lessons from the Great Coaches podcast.
Allister McCaw, good morning and welcome to the Great Coaches podcast.
Well, good morning to you there in Australia. It's a good evening from Florida.
Well, actually, why don't we start there, Allister? Tell us where you are in the world and what you've been doing so far.
At home in Boynton Beach in Florida, which is about 20 minutes south of West Palm Beach, about an hour north of Miami. It's funny, they say when you live in Florida, you start in Miami when you're young, and then you gradually make your way up the coastline the older you get. So I'm getting higher and higher and higher. You know, you go from Miami to Fort Lauderdale to West Palm Beach and more north. So I'm making my way up. Just had a birthday on Friday, actually. So, but great to be back. It's always nice to be back at home in Florida. Just returned from the UK as well, which was nice as well. But good to be on the podcast. Thank you, Paul.
Well, Allister, we've been chatting over the years, and I'm a big fan of the work that you do. And of course, I love following you all around the world as you travel to some of these great sporting organisations. And I'm hoping one day a job might open up as a assistant, and I get to come along with you and meet some of them. But this interview is not about me. It's I really want to get into you and the latest book that you've written, which is a terrific read. It's called Habits That Make a Champion. And I wanted to just start with a really simple question. What was the impetus to put this book out?
Well, if I look back at when I started in 2016 writing, my first book was 7 Keys to Being a Great Coach. And that was a little bit of my journey in my coaching career for 25 years. However, there was a demand for a book for athletes, for players and athletes and teams. And I remember as an athlete growing up in South Africa, playing a lot of sports. And of course, this was pre-internet times as well, where it's just super easy to look up something on the internet and get the answer instantly. I always struggled to find good books to read that could help me with the mental game and help me with preparation and motivation and so on and so forth. So, there was books out there already, but they were, very scientific in terms of how the left side of the brain thinks and so on and so forth. And, as an athlete, I just wanted practical answers as into how do I deal with nerves? How do I prepare for a race or for an event? How do I deal with maybe an opponent cheating? All these type of things that can happen when you play sports. But I just wanted simple answers. So that was the brainchild to me writing Champion Minded, which is, I would say, the bigger brother to Habits That Make a Champion. And Habits That Make a Champion is really a continuation of Champion Minded, where it's in a very simple, easy way to read. It's 50 habits, everything from, the habit of good preparation, the habit of great self-talk, the habit of consistency, all these type of things that can help any athlete of any level. So that's where the idea came from. Also, I would say with Habits That Make a Champion, one of the small differences is I've learned to listen to this generation better. As we know, the generations are changing all the time. And, I believe that the two most important things you can invest in as a coach or a leader are the generational codes and emotional intelligence. Those are two key areas I believe that every coach or leader should be investing in. But with Habits That Make a Champion, it was really simple, easy to read, things that can help every level of athlete. And I believe it's making a great impact already. So most grateful for that.
Well, I'm going to talk to you about some of the habits that resonated with me as we move through the interview, but something very high level to begin with. And I know that you work a lot with elite sports people and also elite organizations, but very simply, why are habits so important when it comes to success?
Yeah. Well, one of the very first quotes in the book, and I have a lot of quotes in the book, is from John Dryden, where he says, first we make our habits, then our habits make us. And there's a reason why that is the very first quote in the book, is because it's very powerful and it's very true as well. If there's something I've noticed in the most successful athletes, performers, people in the corporate world, entertainment, etc., is that they simply have better habits. It doesn't mean all their habits are perfect. They're human like us, where you make mistakes and there's maybe one or two poor habits, but they're more consistent with their good habits. They've developed habits that have helped them achieve successful things and reach a high level. And habits are something that really are conscious in the beginning. It's not easy to rid a bad habit. For one, I love my chocolate after dinner in the evening, and that's a habit that I've had to cut down a little bit as well. So that's just a simple example of a habit. But I would say that's really what it comes down to, Paul, is successful performers, high-level athletes, people that are successful in the business world, for example, simply have better habits, and they're more consistent at those better habits.
Allister, is there an example you can share with us of a story of a person or a team who was able to improve their performance by taking a fresh look at their habits and perhaps even instigating some new ones?
Yeah, in my line of work, I'm very fortunate to consult and work with various teams and colleges, universities, and individual athletes as well. So if I was to use one example, let's go from the tennis world with a player I worked with for 4 years between 2014 and 2018 was Kevin Anderson. And Kevin reached number 5 in the world on the ATP tennis rankings. He reached the Wimbledon final in 2018, I think it was, where he lost to Novak Djokovic, which is no shame there. And then he also reached the final at the US Open, where he lost to Rafa Nadal. So, two players that have their pocket full of Grand Slam titles. But if I look at Kevin, when we started in 2014, he was already a very disciplined player. I respectfully say that he wasn't the most talented player I've worked with. And why I have so much admiration and respect for that is because he was someone that had to work 5 times, 10 times harder than any other player that I'd worked with. And I'd worked with the number 1 player in the world. I've worked with 14 Grand Slam champions as well. But Kevin stood out for me because he was someone that had to maximize everything he had. Basically, Kevin, I believe if he hadn't have developed great habits, and I'm talking from sun up to sundown, and he took ownership of them. That's another thing as well. He took full responsibility of it, because I can't be there 24/7 watching over him, for example. But from his wake up time to the breakfast that he would have, he'd prepare his breakfast with different seeds and nuts and all these things for a good 10-15 minutes to make his cereal every single morning. Before he'd come to practice, he'd do his prehabilitation work, which is your foam rolling, your stretching, your mobility work, to leaving on time for practice, to being there well on time. His warm-up was 45 minutes. It was very detailed. And I can go on and on and on. And these are what we talk about world-class habits. They're difficult to do. They're monotonous. This is something that he would get up and do every single day for years. So that's an example of an athlete that was already a good player, but was able to take himself to good to great through developing better habits and being more consistent in them, for example. I always like to say that the average do it sometimes, the good do it most of the time, the great do it all of the time. And that is something that Kevin took himself from being good to great, from doing it most of the time to doing it all of the time. And that's an example, I'd say, from an individual athlete. Working with teams, one of the teams I worked with just pre-COVID was Paris Saint-Germain, the French football team. I worked with some of their coaching staff and performance team as well, and already a very successful club, of course, in the world of football. But some of the habits that we changed there was just the consistency in communication, collaboration. Developing small habits on a daily basis that helped them function better as a team, because you're dealing with 20-30 backroom staff in one of those big teams. They have 7 physiotherapists, they have 4 sports scientists, they just have a host of people. So changing the habits in terms of learning how to communicate better, learning how to collaborate better, working together as a team, being more self-aware of themselves and also socially aware, which is important. So those were changes that really helped the backroom staff, so to say, of Paris Saint-Germain.
Allister, just listening to you, I'm wondering, when do habits become obsessions, and does that line at times become a problem?
Conor McGregor, who's obviously very, very well known in the UFC and fighting, says, that the best are obsessed. And I think it was also Steven Gerrard, the former Liverpool captain and England captain, who also said, every single day I was obsessed at practice. I had to be the best. I had to win that next tackle. I had to outwork my teammates. Even though they were my teammates, they're still in a way opponents for me. So you get to understand the mindset of a champion, and the obsession they have with developing great habits and being consistent as them. And I'm going to probably use that word quite a lot in this show is just consistency. It's one thing having habits, but the more consistent they are, the more powerful they will be, and the more positive outcomes and results that you'll get. But if I look at myself, Paul, when I was a former athlete, I competed in 5 world championships in duathlon, and I was 2-time national champion. If I look back at it now, it's crazy to think what I would do, and I was obsessed every single day. I would think about it 24/7. Everything I'd put in my mouth, food wise, it would be: is this going to take me closer to my goals? Is this going to take me closer to a world championship or further away? So that is a kind of obsession. I didn't have fast food for years. I even remember on Christmas Day at my parents having just lean chicken and rice while they were having the traditional roast beef and the gravy and everything else. That's obsession, and those are habits that I built. Anybody that's reached a very high level in anything, Paul, does have some type of perfection, does have some type of obsession. They have very highly disciplined habits, because in all honesty, there is no other way to the top in a particular field without having those traits.
Well, let's talk about one of those traits in particular. And in the book, you talk about the importance of being coachable. And you give the example of Michael Jordan, who said that his greatest skill was being teachable. Now, why is being coachable so important?
If I see what the difference is between, again, we talk about good and great athletes, is that you can be very talented. You can be at a very high level, but the only way you're going to improve is your ability to be teachable, your ability to be coachable. And I think it was Steve Kerr of the Warriors, the NBA team. And I think this was back in 2016, 2017. I could be stand to be corrected, when they won, I think, their second NBA title, consecutive title. And they asked Steve Kerr, who's, for me, one of the standout coaches in not just basketball, but in sports, what made Steph Curry so good? What was it about him? And, Steve Kerr really put it down to one answer. And he said, he's just so coachable. No matter how good Steph becomes, he still wants to get better. And, he asks me questions at every practice. After practice, he asks me, how did I do? What can I do better? How can I get better, for example? And that's something that I actually mentioned in the book, Habits That Make a Champion, Paul, is that the best demand feedback. They don't just wait for it from their coaches or from their managers. They ask for feedback. And that's the only way that you get better. That's the way you speed up the process of becoming better at a certain craft or what you do, is that you're asking for feedback. And that's what I've seen in some of the best athletes as well. Just talking about Kevin, the tennis player, he would be someone that would be continuously asking questions. Another passion of mine is Formula One. And, Michael Schumacher, of course, is undoubtedly one of the greatest drivers, if not the greatest driver. And, he took a poorly performing Ferrari, and they said he was crazy going to Ferrari because, the car was always breaking down. It was always trouble. And he made that a championship winning car. And one of the qualities of Michael was that he was very curious. He was very inquisitive. They said that he knew absolutely everything about the car. The feedback that he was able to give his team, after taking the car out in the lap, that's what made that car so good. And that's what made him such a great driver, is that Michael was coachable. The Steph Currys were coachable. The Roger Federers, for example, as well. And gosh, I have so many stories that I could go into. And I know we don't have all the time in the world, but I remember being in Dubai a few years ago, and Roger trains in Dubai, used to train in Dubai in the off season while he was still playing. And I was working with a player there who was actually number 2 in the world at the time, Svetlana Kuznetsova. And Roger was practicing next to us every single day. So I got to see Roger's practices for basically 2 to 3 weeks every December. And I was always just amazed, because at the time he was number one in the world. And I think at that stage he'd won maybe 15 Grand Slams. This is a few years ago. And, there he was. There was a lot of talking in the practice, and he was just asking questions. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? How do I improve the drop shot? How do I do? I was thinking, this guy's number one in the world, and he's continually asking questions and wanting feedback. He's not resting on his laurels. He's not sitting back. And that is what makes these kind of athletes such a standout, is that we only see them at, Grand Slam Sunday final or the World Cup or whatever it may be, but we don't see what goes on behind the scenes. Is that these athletes and these high performers are so coachable, and they're willing to listen. And, this is something that I try and pass on to university athletes and college athletes who are sometimes not that coachable. Is the key to taking that next step and being the best that you can be.
The hustle doesn't have to hurt. If performance pressure is making it hard to breathe, Grow Therapy helps you navigate stress, set boundaries, and actually feel like yourself again. Whether it's your first time in therapy or your 50th, Grow makes it easier to find a therapist who fits you, not the other way around. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Grow accepts over 100 insurance plans, including Medicaid in some states. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/start now to get started. That's growtherapy.com/start now. growtherapy.com/start now. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
Hi friends, Grace from the Working Hard podcast here. When you're stretching every dollar, a little goes a long way, and Walmart Business is here to help. They make it easy to order what you need, from tech and cleaning supplies to everyday essentials, all at low prices and with helpful tools like spend tracking and tax-exempt purchasing for eligible organizations. Because when your operations are smooth, your impact can be bigger. Visit business.walmart.com to get started.
One of the other things that caught my eye in the book, Allister, was this line. And you say, quote, "You're not born mentally tough. You choose to be. It's a skill that is learned and developed." And I don't know why it caught my eye. I guess I thought mental toughness was actually something that some of us are born with. But I was really fascinated to hear the back end of the sentence where you say it's something that could be learned and developed. So when you work with our athletes, and you just talked about college athletes, and when you work with them to develop this skill, what are some of the things you do together?
Yeah, everybody comes from a different background, different values, different beliefs. Some people come from very privileged backgrounds, some people don't, some people come from more difficult backgrounds. So, definitely your upbringing molds you in terms of who you become. It's something that, you don't choose your upbringing. You don't choose the first, whatever it may be, 15, 18 years of your life. You're at home, and the way you're brought up with your parents, and so on and so forth. Now, we could argue that point to an extent that, if you're brought up with a lot of adversity, obstacles, and we've seen that a lot of great athletes like Simone Biles, the gymnast, and LeBron James were brought up in very, very difficult homes where they had to fight for everything. And that's what's made them who they are today. And that's why you see they're just so determined and so focused and such tough competitors. So they've had, without choice, they've had those upbringings that's made them resilient, that's given them a lot of grit, that's given them a lot of feistiness to be great at what they do. But there comes a stage in your life where you do get to choose your attitude every single day, regardless of what adversity that you've been through. You do get to choose how resilient you're going to be. We all get that choice at the end of the day. I remember growing up in South Africa, I would do cross-country races and track and field. And I remember competing against some of the really poor areas in Johannesburg and Soweto and these type of places where, some runners, some athletes would pitch up with no shoes, and we'd be running on really, really rough terrain and thorns and stones and glass and so on and so forth. And, they had no choice, for example, and they were just great competitors. They were tough competitors to compete against. And then you'd see, maybe the kids from the more privileged schools pitching up with the new Nikes and Asics and all these nice things, but they would just really just be outrun by the rest, for example. So, your upbringing does mold your mindset. It does mold your self-discipline. I was very fortunate to be brought up in a highly disciplined home, and also school as well, where small things like making your bed, and that's something that I write a book about in the book Habits That Make a Champion, is the importance of making your bed. And we know there's that very famous video online as well from the General McRaven, I think it was, of the importance of making your bed. It was actually quite funny, Paul, because I had somebody send in on Instagram a photo of their child's bed made with the Champion Minded book on top of it, saying that, thank you, it's taught our kid all these kind of lessons. And for me, Paul, that's why I do it. If you ask me, why do you write these books and what gives you the motivation, it's to see those type of things, that I'm making an impact and making a difference on other people's lives.
What have you learned along the journey, Allister, about building healthy self-talk habits? And I ask this question because I watch tennis players and they lose a point and they you see them sort of castigating themselves, almost yelling at themselves. And it always intrigues me, like, how do you bounce back from that so quickly to then play the next point? And these are people that are at Wimbledon, and on the world stage. So what have you learned about self-talk and making it more healthy?
Well, that's a great example, because one of my first loves, Paul, was tennis, but I could not control my emotions. And I was just the worst on a tennis court. I'm talking when I was 12, 13, 14. And again, probably one of the reasons why I probably needed the book Habits That Make a Champion back then, but I didn't have it yet. So all those experiences of I couldn't control my emotions, and my self-talk would be poor, for example. So I've been there. I know what it feels like to be in that mindset. But developing better self-talk is one of the most powerful things that you can do. I always like to say that the most important conversation you have with yourself is in the morning in the mirror. It already starts there the moment you wake up. What are you saying to yourself when you're looking in the mirror? Are you going to those areas that you don't like? I don't like my nose. I don't like my ears. This, that. Well, what kind of way of that is that to start your day? In fact, I even have some stick-it notes on my mirror at home, which will have things like win the day and you're awesome. And I know that sounds all cheesy and so on and so forth, but our mind is such a powerful thing, is that we can have negative thoughts can control us so quickly and can overcome us. So it's important to have those cues or those visuals, so to say, first thing in the morning. That's worked for me. But you can talk yourself in or out of almost anything. It's another difference in the world's best performers. And when people say to me, what is the one thing that makes the best athlete? I said, there is no one thing. There is so many different things, but definitely self-talk, the power of self-talk and your ability to overcome negative thoughts. They asked Tiger Woods, when he was dominating in the early 2000s, what he felt made him such a great golfer. Now, again, years and years of dedication, of discipline, of practice, of repetition, monotonous repetition every single day. But he said it was his ability to forget the last shot. That's what a powerful mindset is. And we can sometimes have our self-talk defeat us after a poor shot or something we've done in a match or a game, for example, and we take that to the next point. And self-talk is really, for me, it's one of the most important things on a daily basis, to being confident, to having self-belief, to having a powerful and positive self-image comes down to your self-talk.
Another idea I was intrigued about in the book was this one about taking a history lesson to rebuild your confidence. Simple idea, but very powerful. Could you tell us about it?
Again, it's something that I used to do as an athlete. We didn't have internet back in the day just to go look up something, to go on Instagram and get some powerful quotes or etc. So when I'd be lacking confidence, or I maybe had a poor race, or I just wasn't feeling motivated, for example, I would look at old photographs. Back then there wasn't many videos going around. I don't think YouTube was around yet. So you just couldn't see. I'd like to look at old photos of me, maybe at a race I'd won, holding a trophy, or on the medal podium, to remind myself that I'd done it before and I could do it again. Because again, and that's why I love your previous self-talk. We can talk ourselves in or out of anything. And knowing as an athlete that when you're out of sport, maybe because of an injury or illness, you can start to talk yourself out of things. Oh my gosh, I'm losing fitness. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen when I get back? Am I still going to be as good as I was? And this dialogue in our head can defeat us and can pull us down. So I always love that expression: is take a history lesson, go back to some of your most proudest moments, your highest achievements, your best achievements, and that will just remind you that you have been there before, and you will get there again, especially if you've lost confidence or you've lost your mojo, so to say.
Allister, you've been around elite sport for a long time now, and you talked earlier about some of the champions you've worked with, and you've also seen others up close, like the Roger Federer example you gave. But I wanted to ask you, what watching these obsessed people, or, we used that word earlier, people with deeply ingrained habits and also far-reaching goals that many of us will never aspire to. But what has this taught you about the quest for perfection? You've got to be passionate to be successful in something. You're not going to be successful in the long run if you're not passionate about what you do, or that you love what you do. And the fact that you're passionate about something doesn't mean that you'll love it all the time, that you feel motivated all the time. I loved what I did in terms of sports, but did I wake up every day and feel excited about it or motivated about it? No. That's where a longer term goal or purpose gave me that motivation. But the quest for perfection is, I believe, something every high performer has, is that good is not good enough. They want better, and that's what's made them who they are, and that's what's taken them to a high level. However, the downside, and Brené Brown speaks about this quite a lot as well, is that perfection can ruin you. A lot of the time when I consult with athletes of a very high level, they are perfectionists. They want everything perfect. They want everything just right. But that can be something that obviously can affect their performance as well. So a lot of my time is helping them and providing the tools of how they can let go of, not completely let go of perfection, but to learn how to channel that, to learn how to control that. One example is a perfectionist will be very disappointed after they make a mistake. So let's just use a tennis player or a golfer, for example. They hit a poor shot and it affects them. So they focus on that. And that's something I try to help them with is, when they're in the heat of competition, is that they focus on the good things as much as possible, more than the bad things. Now, it's good to, if you've made a mistake, is to correct it, to maybe spend 5-10 seconds in terms of thinking, what would I do there next time? But especially in competition, that's where you have to keep a positive mindset and keep focusing on the things that you're doing well, not on the things that you're doing poorly. So that's just an example of being able to control perfection, so to say, when competing. But I've seen many an athlete, and especially junior level, 15, 16-year-olds, just be really just overcome by perfection, that they just can't get over the fact that they've made a mistake or not won a match or a tournament, for example. And it can be very, very tough to watch. My favourite part of the book, though, Allister, was towards the end, and I know I messaged you on this when I was reading through it. It's, I don't know if this surprises you or not, but it's the habit of surrounding yourself with the right people. It just connected with me, perhaps because, you know, we've moved country and we're rebooting our friendship and our life, and I really like this idea of the right people, making sure that people around you, and we can all define right in our own way. But I would actually be more interested in hearing from you and what routines you use to make sure that you are surrounding yourself with the right people.
I think it's important to know what your values are, what you look for in a relationship or relationships. You know, I always love that quote by Jim Rohn, who said, you know, you become the 5 people you spend the most time with. And, you know, if you actually sit back and think about that, who are those 5 people I spend the most time with? The obvious ones would maybe be your family, but I challenge you to maybe look outside of that as well, of who maybe 3 or 4 other people are that you spend the most time with. Are those people that align with your values? Are those people that you'd like to be like? Do they motivate you? Do they inspire you? Those are important questions to ask yourself. And again, you know, Paul, when I speak to university students or high schools or even elementary school, it's one of the things I really try to bring across as much as possible is think about the people that you spend your time with, because that's who you will become. You know, another great quote, and I love my quotes, as you know, probably on Twitter and Instagram, is you become the people you spend the most time with. And that is true. You know, so, you know, sometimes in life as well, you know, I always believe we change every 5 years. You know, our experiences of what we've gone through, it changes us as well. And sometimes we have to let go of certain people in our lives that maybe don't align with us anymore, and I've experienced that the older I get as well. You know, some people drop off and you add new people and so on and so forth. But the ultimate goal is are you becoming a better person? And you can become a better person by choosing to have better quality people in your life.
From better quality people, which I know can be subjective and objective and very difficult to do. I think to reform groups is very difficult. But I'd like to just finish our discussion today with a topic that comes up towards the end of the book, and you've actually alluded to it in this interview too, and it's the habit of self-discipline and the importance of controlling your emotions. Now, you talked about that being a challenge you had when you were a younger person, and there's many of us that would love to be better at self-discipline. And also, I can think of numerous occasions where I wish I was better at controlling my emotions, whether that's in the boardroom or at the family dinner table. But is it something that can be coached? And if it is, what's the 1 or 2 things we could be doing tomorrow to get better at it?
I believe the key to self-improvement and self-development is self-awareness. Your ability to self-reflect, and this is something I do each evening. I ask myself 3 questions. The first one being, what did I do well today? What could I have done better today? And who did I make better today? Those are the 3 simple questions I ask myself, which take no more than maybe 30 seconds or a minute to answer. But through that exercise on a daily basis, I'm self-reflecting on conversations I've had, what I could have maybe have handled better. I was maybe abrupt on the telephone today, or to the lady behind the counter at the post office, for example. But that is the way that we improve ourselves, so how we better ourselves, that we're aware of our actions, of our words, of our behaviors. And sometimes it can be a very difficult exercise because it might be something you're not proud of, that you know, that you couldn't control your emotions that day, for example. And, you know, we are all like that. You know, I might write books on positivity and motivation, but I'm like anybody else. I can lose my temper sometimes. I can maybe say things that I regret, or handle a certain situation that I knew could have been handled better. But the power of improving yourself, of self-developing, is the ability to be more self-aware. So I would definitely go there.
Allister, it's been terrific chatting with you. I feel like we could keep going, but perhaps we'll save that for another day. The book's called Habits That Make a Champion. It's a great read. I'll put all the links to it in the show notes, as well as your terrific Twitter feed, which I'm not a huge social media user, but I do enjoy checking yours out. And there is some great quotes and ideas in there that we can all use on a daily basis. So, Allister, great to connect with you again. Thanks for your time and good luck with wherever you're traveling next to in the world.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure being on your podcast. Keep up the great work. And, if I just look at the list of guests that you've had on this podcast, it's just, I'm humbled to be on here. So thank you so much again.
Thanks, Allister.
Hi, everyone. You've been listening to Allister McCaw talking about his new book, The Habits That Make a Champion. I hope you got a lot out of Allister's engaging style and found a few ideas that you can bring to your own dinner table, locker room, or boardroom table for discussion. And just before we go, if you have any feedback, then please let us know. Just like Daniel Parr, who said, I was at a US seminar some years ago, and the keynote speaker was a highly decorated US Navy SEAL, and this was exactly the type of thing he was talking about. Owning and defining the issues, sharing these with your team, and coming up with solutions. No one gets left behind. Gosh, thanks, Daniel. We love the interaction with people around the world who listen, and so if you have any feedback or comments, please let us know. And if they're positive ones, then let your friends know too. All the details on how you can connect with us are in the show notes or on our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com.
Our HBCUs have a legacy that's straight up golden. And McDonald's is proud to help keep it that way. Since 2021, the Golden Arches has connected with the Thurgood Marshall College Fund to provide $1 million in scholarships for students headed to our HBCUs. That kind of cash helps keep bright minds on the yard, dreams within reach, and the future golden. Learn more about McDonald's Black and Positively Golden scholarships at mcdblackscholars.com.